Okay. Good evening. So yesterday I think the concept of real exchange rate, PPP and nominal exchange rate, I think it is clear. Yes. So new GDP calculation, this is 2015. 2015. So that time it is CSO, Central Statistical Office. Okay. So what were the main changes? See, there were some criticisms also on the new method of calculation that India has inflated its GDP. Inflated, you have increased your number. Okay. But in the but in the exam, basically, we are not going to think much about it. But you will only write that there were some criticisms like change in methodology, etc. So what they exactly did? So first change is change with respect to base year. Okay, so change with respect to base year. So earlier the base year was 2004-5. Now they've changed it to 2011-12. Base year is the reference years for making comparison, isn't it? So earlier real GDPs were calculated at 4-5 prices. Now here real GDP will be calculated at 11-12 prices. That is one change. Okay. Second change was earlier official GDP was GDP calculated at factor cost, which is adjusted to inflation. But now this factor cost methodology has been shifted to market prices to be in line with the international standards. To be in line with the international standards, so the calculation of GDP now after 2015, it is at market prices. That means your market price, you all know, market price includes something like the net indirect taxes. It includes the net indirect taxes, and therefore there were some criticism saying that you can manage, but this is an international phenomena, they calculate it at market price only. That means they can manage GDP by managing the indirect taxes and subsidies. Managing the indirect taxes and subsidies, that can be done. Okay, then another important aspect is instead of calculating GVA at factor cost, instead of calculating GVA at factor cost, so earlier they were calculating the value addition at factor cost. So instead of this, they have come up with concept of GVA at basic prices, GVA at basic price, okay, which includes the net production taxes. Okay, and then from here they started arriving at calculating GDP at market prices, which will also include the net product taxes. So earlier this concept of basic prices were not there, so they were calculating things at factor cost only. So now they started calculating it at basic prices, and then they were arriving at market prices. This is one more change which they did. Okay, and then there were a few other changes also, and they were commenting because of this change also there are some problems. So earlier earlier when they were calculating or taking the GVA, now they were taking it at the establishment level, now it is enterprise level. So what is this enterprise? Simple logic here. So earlier, before 2015, they were calculating the value additions at the establishment level. Now they started calculating it at the enterprise level. For example, this is Tata's main enterprise. This enterprise has several other establishments. That means it has sub companies. Tata's has other small extensions. This is the main enterprise. Now earlier, establishment means you are calculating the values at each of these entities. So now they are collecting data mainly from the head office. So this is basically, this head office is nothing but the enterprise. So data collection, they said we will do it from the enterprise level. Now there were some comments also made on this method. So what is the comment made? Earlier you were talking about the value addition of production here, you are able to estimate it. There were some non-manufacturing activities which are done by the enterprise. Non-manufacturing means it need not be core value addition, etc. These things are also added. The head office can do something else other than the core manufacturing, and you are just relying on the data given by the enterprise at the, that is head office at the top level. And what they were trying to explain is you do not have the complete data. And second is, what happened is after this calculation, after 2015, we said India was projecting something like 2014 plus to 2017-18. We were projecting a GDP growth rate of around 7.1%. And this growth rate which we were projecting was also based on the new method of calculation. New method means market prices. Okay, and we started collecting data in a new format, etc. And some of the economists were saying your real growth is not 7.1, it is only 4%, 4 to 4.5. You inflated your growth. And second thing is, after the new data came up, what happened was the contribution of manufacturing to GDP, was also shown at a higher level. So before 2015, the contribution of manufacturing to GDP was at a lesser level, around let's say 14%. Now you started showing it at around 16.5. So what they were saying is some aspects related to services. Suppose, for example, extensions of manufacturing can be transportation, or generally transportation related aspects were treated as services. Now this transportation, they started adding it in the manufacturing. Okay, so they were collecting data from here, and when they are collecting data from here, it is not just about core manufacturing, but also other things which are not related to core manufacturing. They also started adding it, and because of which manufacturing contribution to GDP was increasing. This is a negative comment made by somebody outside. I think you're getting my point. No, so this is a comment made on the government. So like this, they make comments on the government. So because the change in methodology, earlier you are calculating it at the establishment level. Now you have started calculating it at the enterprise level. When you are collecting data from the enterprise level, okay, some aspects you are trying to impute. Number one, impute is something like you are trying to derive. Second is some things which are not pure manufacturing also you started including. That is, there is no pure value addition and still you are including. This is what they were saying. You are not adding much value and still you are including in the value addition. So this was one more. And then another aspect is earlier there was data collection. Basically now they started collecting data through a new data source which is called as MCA 21 database, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, 21st century. Ministry of Corporate Affairs. That means earlier they used to take a sample of RBI's entity which had around, let's say, 2 lakh companies. Now you have more than 3 lakh or 5 lakh. Now this MCA 21 has the data. That means it has the data of all those companies which have filed their accounting statements, in the at least once in the last 3 years. Those companies which have filed their accounts at least once in the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, if a particular company has filed its accounting details or accounting data with this portal, MCA 21, Corporate Affairs Ministry database. That is, it is there. Suppose, let's say there are some 4 lakh companies. So you are going to take the data of all those companies which have at least filed their accounting details once in the last 3 years. Once in the last 3 years, you will take their data, how much they have produced, whatever it is. Now the question is, if they have filed it in 2012, okay, and 13, 14, 15, they have not filed, okay, and you are going to try, you will try to impute the data. That means you don't have the data. 2012 they have filed, 13 they have not filed, 14 they have not filed. Okay, now 15 when you are trying to calculate it through the new method from 15 onwards. So they have filed it once in 2012. So you will consider them for your output. What is the output of this particular company? But that is how they started taking the data. Now outside entities started commenting. That means this company, how do you know this company still exists? There are several unorganized sectors in this database. So these sectors, do you think unorganized companies, do you think they are still there? Now maybe it would have closed its shop in 13 or 14. Company would have shut, owner would have died. Anything can happen. Then how are you imputing the data? So this is how they were commenting on this database. Are you able to get this? Okay, so because you have added more companies which are non-operative, and therefore you have inflated the GDP. This is also one comment made by outsider. You will not blame the government when you are writing the answer. It's very clear, no. See, here there was also a topic which was added in the economic survey in 17, which said our calculation of GDP is correct. Of course, I exactly don't remember the topic name, but it is like this. They have given the way they have calculated and said the way we have calculated is okay, and it is also accepted. But these are comments made. That is, there was comment made on the database which you have used, because private economist was not given any access to this database, and this database has all those companies which have filed their accounts once in at least 3 years. Is this clear? Okay, so this is MCA 21 database which they were taking. And then there was also one more change. Of course, it's not a big change here. So one is factor cost to market price. I think it is clear. Okay, and then base year change. That is one more. Okay, and then they also added labor input. So labor related, you call it as labor input. Okay. Do you think labor efficiency is also required for GDP output? Labor efficiency. Okay, it is required. Okay. Will it have a direct impact? Yes, for example, let's say for $2.9 trillion GDP, this got generated when there were something like, let's say, 2 lakh working hours, just an example, 2 lakh or 20 lakh working hours, just an example. That means for creating an output of $2.9 trillion, let's say there were something like 2 lakh working hours. It's difficult to calculate how many hours they work, but 2 lakh working hours was able to create, let's say, $2 trillion or a $2.9 trillion economy. Now, tomorrow, if $5 trillion is also created by the same number of labor hours. $5 trillion is the output. It is created by, let's say, 2 lakh working hours. What has happened to my labor productivity? Increased. This is how you calculate basically. That means what is the output of GDP, and then what are the number of labor hours put in. So if I divide both, you get the efficiency part. Now if I give the labor, let's say I give the labor better technology, that means I give them better machines, more efficient machines. If I give them more modern technology which is more efficient, that is more better capital goods, better technology, and also impart skills, better skills. Better skills means what? Human capital. Better skills is basically you're developing the human capital. If you increase this, then automatically labor efficiency will increase. Labor efficiency will increase. That means with less working hours, labor hours, you will be able to create more output. This is the logic. That means technological efficiency or human capital efficiency or the number of new capital goods if you are giving, this will add up to the GDP growth. That means labor productivity is also an important aspect for GDP. Okay. So therefore, in the calculation parts, they also talk about something like the labor inputs. Okay. So effective labor input. So earlier, before 2015, all the labor was given similar weightage. Weightage for all the labor is same. The weight in the weighted averages in statistics, or any labor, the labor can be worker, owner, okay, or a helper, etc. Everybody is given same weightage. In the new calculation, when they were talking about labor inputs, they use different weightages for different people. Different weightage means the weightage which they have allotted. So the weightage which they give, the weightage which they were giving is different. Suppose you give 0.7 weightage for the owner of a, generally owner of a firm, owner of a small company also, but you are giving for a helper, your weightage is let's say 0.3. So that means the weights you are allotting to different workers is different for calculation in the new method, but the weights allotted for all the workers is same in the old method. This is what they did with respect to the labor input. Of course, you are not going to write this if he's asking GDP, new GDP calculation, you will talk about effective labor input mechanism has been changed where different workers have been assigned different weightages in the new method. This is what we'll write in English, that's all. Okay, similarly, the database considered for calculation, which is MCA 21, which is more comprehensive in comparison to the earlier RBI's database. This is what we write. Okay, so no calculations, nothing. There was also a change in base year from 4-5 to 11-12. Okay, and base years should be generally most recent years for better calculation. This is what we have understood, more recent year, and it should not be that year where the fluctuations were high or low. It should be a kind of a stable year. Okay, that is another change. And they started using an enterprise method for calculations or GVA calculations rather than an establishment method. Enterprise method means taking up data mainly from the head offices. Okay, mainly from the head offices rather than collecting data from the each and every establishment or each and every entity. Then in the new methodology, instead of factor cost, they have come up with what? Factor cost. They have started calculating GDP at market prices. So the official GDP of India, if you ask, so official GDP of India is no more GDP at factor cost. So official GDP of India is no more GDP at factor cost, is GDP at market prices only. GDP at market prices only. That is another change. And then for gross value addition calculation, earlier they were doing it at factor cost. Now they introduced a new concept called as GV at basic prices. So this is how you start writing. Okay, so now the criticism part is something like, of course, this criticism you will not write in detail. If at all you are writing also, it should not be more than 2 lines. Okay, so this criticism, what is the first criticism? So first criticism is, this mechanism can be manipulated through net indirect taxes. Net indirect taxes. Okay, so this is what they were trying to say. Second is, our GDP growth rates from 2012-13 and 2013-14, the growth rates were also changed based on the new method. Earlier output, it was a period where the GDP growth rates were less than 5%. But with the new method, they started saying that the GDP growth rates are around 6.5, 6.3. This is something like you're using the new method for the old calculation, and they said, and this was mainly happening because one is you're calculating it at market prices. Earlier it was factor cost. Second is you started using this method called the enterprise method. Okay, and they were also saying, what about other indicators? Whenever economy does well, your other indicators should do well. Okay, so for example, in 2017-18, okay, the unemployment rate data shows unemployment rate in India was 6.1%, which is one of the highest in the last 40 years. So when your economy is growing at 7%, okay, that is a decent growth rate, better than China, better than China, 7.1. India was growing 2014 to 18 data. Then how is it that unemployment rate is so high? This is what they were questioning. Okay. Then other indicators, for example, in growing economies, generally imports will be at a higher level in growing economies. If a country is growing, people have more consumption capacity. So because you have more money in hand, but imports should be at a higher level. But that situation, imports were not at a higher level. Are you able to get this? Okay, imports were not so high. Then growth is there, but imports were not high. Unemployment rate was high. Then what about other indicators they were asking? For example, other indicators like current account deficit or the fiscal deficit, etc. They were not so great. So your other deficits, when they are not doing so great, okay, then GDP is growing at 7%, 7.1% is questionable. They were saying this is something like, so this GDP is also because of your new database which you have taken, MCA 21. In this MCA 21 data, there is something like more of non-operative companies whose output you have added, and therefore GDP looks at a higher level. This is also comment by foreign economists. Understood? No. So other indicators also become important. No, when GDP is doing well, then why is it that your other indicators are so bad? Okay. So for example, there is something like index of industrial production. IIP index we call it, as we discuss in the industry class. So IIP's index of industrial production, it's a volume index of manufacturing. The number of goods manufactured, it's a volume index. So this IIP, index of industrial production, also was not doing so great. Unemployment rate was around 6.1. Okay. And imports were not at a higher level, and other indicators were not doing so great. And it is because of your calculation methodology of MCA 21, new non-operative companies, etc., or the new method of enterprise which you have used, or because you have changed base years. That is the reason your GDP seems to be high. So there was continuous articles in the newspaper that some of the economists were saying India's GDP is debatable. Okay, so after 2015, but now nobody is talking. We find that our GDP is fine, our calculation is all okay. Hope it is clear. Is this clear? Understood? So put the heading new GDP calculation. New GDP calculation. The new series mainly focused on upgrading our methodology in line with UN standards. Upgrading our methodology in line with UN standards. Okay. First one, change in base year. From 2004-5 to 11-12. Change in base year from 2004-5 to 11-12, write down. The base year is a reference year. Base year is a reference year. With respect to which GDP is calculated. With respect to which GDP is calculated. Base years are generally stable years. Base years are generally stable years. With fewer fluctuations. And availability of reliable data. Availability of reliable data. Base years are generally recent years. Base years are generally recent years. recent years to facilitate easy calculation. To facilitate easy calculation. Is that okay? Next, second point, 2, write down. Change in data used to measure manufacturing sector growth. Change in data used to measure manufacturing sector growth. Manufacturing sector growth. Write down. The performance of manufacturing sector. The performance of manufacturing sector was previously evaluated by using data of annual survey of industries. Using data of annual survey of industries, which comprises over 2 lakh factories. Which comprises over 2 lakh factories. Post 2015, the data of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, MCA 21 includes 5 lakh companies. So I'm not mentioning the criticism there. So in this 5 lakh companies, how did you get that? One in 3 years. Okay, and once in 3 years, if they are filing the statement, okay, then you are taking that. Okay, next point. GDP at factor cost. Next point, GDP at factor cost was replaced with GDP at market prices. GDP at factor cost was replaced with GDP at market prices. Write down. Post 2015, international practice of GDP at market prices, and also a sector-wise estimate, of GVA at basic prices, is also calculated. Basic prices include net production taxes. You know this, right? Net production factor cost plus net production. Then calculation of labor income. Before 2015, all labor used to be equal. In the new series after 2015, in the new series after 2015, the concept of effective labor input is used. The concept of effective labor input is used. Effective labor input. Concept of effective labor input is used. That is, different weights are assigned. Different weights are assigned based on whether one is an owner, one is a owner, whether he is a owner, based on whether he is a owner, comma, hired professional, etc. Owner, hired professional, etc. Okay. Next point. Change in the way value addition in agriculture was calculated. Change in the way value addition in agriculture was calculated. Change in the way value addition in agriculture was calculated. Before 2015, value addition was confined to farm produce. Value addition was confined to farm produce. After 2015, value addition in agriculture is extended beyond farm produce. For example, livestock data is now considered in the new method. Livestock data is now considered in the new method. Okay. Then just write, don't extend this point, introduction of GVA at basic prices. That same point only, but write it as a separate point. Introduction of GVA at basic prices. Next point. The new method captured income. Generated by financial sectors. Like stock exchanges, stock brokers, mutual funds, pension funds. Pension fund is pension fund companies. Mutual fund is mutual fund companies. Okay. Stock exchanges, as well as regulatory bodies. Like SEBI, IRDA, etc. Okay. So earlier, they were only taking the incomes of banks and insurance companies. They were not interested in taking the data of all other financial sector entities like stock brokers, etc., stock exchanges. And they were in mutual funds also, maybe only Unit Trust of India, UTI you call it as, Unit Trust of India. So that's all. Now they have extended it in collecting a wider data of stock exchanges, stock markets, etc. This is what they did. Okay. Now the next area is how? There is tax also, no? Stock exchange transaction. How do you get? You have to open a demat account. Okay. Then you are going to do transactions. Then there is tax which you pay to the stock exchanges, STT. Yes. Okay. SEBI, basically the data of SEBI is a regulatory body basically. Companies registrations and all is not free. Okay, so if you are a different entity operating in the stock markets, no, you have to put your registrations under SEBI. Okay, so the last one in this topic, the last area in this national income is the potential GDP concept. Concept of potential GDP. So the meaning of potential GDP is something like it is not real. Potential means what? The country has a potential to reach a GDP of so much. It's a kind like it's like an estimation, right? Okay, so when I say potential GDP, suppose let's say this is the potential GDP for the next 5 years. Next 5 years, let's say from 2020 to 2025. Okay, so India's potential GDP is around 8 to 10% growth. India has a growth of 8 to 10%, which is a potential GDP. The meaning is, this is potential means this is not actual. Potential means this is not actual. Okay, so this is an estimation. So potential GDP is the maximum potential which the country has. That is the maximum GDP which you are estimating. Okay, when all the factors of production are fully employed. When all the factors of production are fully employed means, all the factors of production means land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. That means what is the potential GDP of a country? That is what is the potential of a country to reach this level of output. Okay, when all its factors of production are completely involved. All its factors of production are used completely. Factors of production, land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship are used completely. What is the output which it is going to achieve without inflationary effect? Without inflationary effect. In 2021 or 20, I am not able to recollect, there was this question asked, what is potential GDP and what are the determinants of potential GDP? This was the question. So what is potential GDP and what are the determinants of potential GDP? So potential GDP is the maximum GDP which a country can reach when all its country can reach without inflation, when all its factors of production are fully utilized. Okay, fully utilized. This is what is called as potential GDP. Now, what are the factors that can affect the potential GDP? Obviously, the factors are something like the technology can affect the potential GDP. Okay, so if the technology in the process, if better technology comes up, then the potential GDP will be at a higher level. Okay, or labor output or labor efficiency, better human capital if you have, along with the better machines and technology, then also you will have a better potential GDP. And then better policy implementation. Policy implementation is policy implementation along with political stability. Without proper political stability, okay, so that will also have an impact on potential GDP. You have safe countries with better political stability, then automatically investors will invest in such countries. Investments will easily move in such countries and automatically your potential GDP will be at a higher level. Are you able to get this? So, but if suppose it is like Afghanistan, or for example like Pakistan, where the political stability is less. So when the political stability and when we talk about GDP growth is directly proportional. Okay, so when there is no political stability, there will not be any trust. Investors will not invest in Pakistan. So that is how you can't expect a higher growth situation. Okay, so that means these are all factors, labor efficiency, technology, spending in research and development. inflation in the economy. So all this will determine the potential GDP. Is this clear? Okay, so put the heading potential GDP. It is the real value of goods and services. Real value of goods and services. See, when I am saying real value, means I am removing the inflationary effect. So in the prelims, if he is saying potential GDP is the maximum value which it can achieve without inflation, it is same as the real value of goods and services that can be produced when countries' factors of production are fully employed. This is how. Is that clear? That means it is in the Q into P. When you take it as real value, basically, that means if I'm calculating the potential GDP at base year prices, I'm calculating it at base year prices or 2011-12 prices. That means you are removing the inflationary effect. Okay, so write down. It is the real value of goods and services that can be produced. Real value of goods and services that can be produced when countries' factors of production are fully employed. Continue. It is the maximum sustainable level of output. It is the maximum sustainable level of output that an economy can produce. That an economy can produce. It is often used as a benchmark. It is often used as a benchmark to measure the actual level of output. To measure the actual level of output. To measure the actual level of output in an economy. And to measure the extent to which an economy is operating. An economy is operating above or below its potential. Economy is operating above or below its potential. Is it working online? Okay. Above or below its potential. Okay, so see here, that means suppose this is the actual GDP. Actual GDP can be a little above or it can be below. Okay, so you will be able to measure. So during upturn is something like you have better technology coming in, better investments coming in, labor efficiency is increasing. There is every chance that there is an increase with respect to your actual GDP above the potential. Or if suddenly COVID has come, situation has become worse, there is a downturn where it can go down. Okay, so you are far away from the potential GDP. Your expectation is potential GDP will give you an expectation and how much you are away from the potential GDP. Okay, then put the heading. It is determined by several key factors. Potential GDP, it is determined by several key factors. First one, labor force. Labor force. Basics class we discussed, no? Labor force, yes. Write down the size and quality of the labor force. the size and quality of labor force is one of the most important determinants is one of the most important determinants of potential GDP. One of the most important determinants of potential GDP. Okay, continue. A well-educated and skilled labor force. A well-educated and skilled labor force can increase the economy's potential for growth. Can increase the economy's potential for growth. Okay. Then 2, availability of natural resources. Availability of natural resources such as land and minerals, can impact the economy's potential for growth. Can impact the economy's potential for growth. That means if these resources are easily available, then it will increase. Okay. Then political setup and governance. Political setup and governance. Then 5, infrastructure. Infrastructure. 4. Okay. Infrastructure. See, infrastructure has a multiplier effect. Yes or no? So more roads, more ports, better infrastructure, then automatically there's more scope for the potential GDP. Okay, so at times actual GDP, see generally somebody is asking when all the factors of production are already used, but sometimes there can be some technological changes, new investments that are coming in, favorable situations have come, then at times your GDP growth can be way above the potential also. So this is not fixed, no. Suppose Indian products had better acceptance outside, you started producing and selling it abroad. Okay, so is that clear? Yes. So then write down effective utilization of capital. Effective, next point, effective utilization of capital. Countries with lower capital output ratios. Countries with lower capital output ratios. Lower capital output ratios can expect higher potential GDP. Can expect higher potential GDP. Okay. Then technological efficiency. Technological efficiency. Technological advancements can increase. Technological advancements can increase the potential for growth. The potential for growth and productivity. And productivity by improving the efficiency. By improving the efficiency of the production process. Improving the efficiency of the production process. Improving the efficiency of the production process. Okay, so next one, economic structure. economic structure, the composition of economic industries, the composition of economic industries, and the distribution of economic activity, and the distribution of economic activity can impact the economy's potential for growth, can impact the economy's potential for growth. Example, a country with strong manufacturing sector, a country with strong manufacturing sector can have a higher potential for growth, can have a higher potential for growth, higher potential for growth than economies relying on agriculture, than economies relying on agriculture. Next, demographic factors. Demographic factors, write down population growth, demographic factors, continue writing demographic factors. Suppose Canada is there, suppose you have an aging population, okay. So how will you calculate? Means aging population means your labor contribution is very difficult. So your cost for acquiring labor will be higher. Okay, countries like India where you have a favorable demographic dividend. Okay, so you have more working age population, those who are between 15 to 59 years or 64 years. So they can contribute to the GDP. So that means this is one aspect. Then comes labor productivity. One is having labor which can work. Second is the labor should be productive. Then comes your capital output ratio. They are going to check what is the average capital output ratio in the last 6 months or last 1 year, based on which you can estimate the potential GDP. Okay, then now how do you measure governance, etc.? It's very subjective. So somebody asks how these factors are quantified, means very difficult to quantify, but they'll have an overall view of each and every aspect. For example, they will talk about the productive labor hours required for producing $2.9 trillion. Then you will talk about the efficiency, whether it will increase or decrease, based on which they will do it. Is the speed okay, dictation? Huh? Speed बढ़ा दूं? Yeah. Demographic factors, write down. We need a solid notes along with explanation, means we have to write fast. Otherwise, we can't write everything. That is the only thing. So, it happens like some things are there in your material also. Few things are there in your material, and I'm 99% confident that 99% confident that 90% of you will not read all the 4 books. See, so much of confidence I have. Initially, you will start with 1 book. Okay, you will read some 10 pages, 15 pages. Then you will take 1 more book from outside. Somebody would have told you something else is better. Then you will read that. That also you will not complete. There also you will read some 25 pages, 30 pages. Then somebody will say, fix to your notes. Then you will read the notes, then you are not satisfied. Then 1 more book. But ultimately we end up reading nothing. That is bad. Fix to 1 or 2 books, and better is you read that. Anyhow, question will be general only. No, question is something like mains answers generally cannot be written from a textbook. Okay, that's for sure. Okay, direct from textbook, what you will write? Nothing. Next, what was the last thing? Economic, demographic, yeah. Population growth, aging population can also impact potential GDP. Can also impact potential GDP. So aging population will limit the potential for growth. Aging population will limit the potential for growth. That's it. Enough. We'll take up a easy topic. See, this chapter generally many of them think that it is for prelims, but unemployment in prelims is very easy and very limited, but mostly challenge comes up with mains. So there is some data which we have to write in this chapter. Okay, so mainly, for example, there are different questions. For example, over tertiarization of economy has led to jobless growth. So jobless growth is a concept, or what are the reasons for jobless growth in India? Okay, so that is all related to unemployment. Or there was a question asked like how globalization has led to informalization of Indian economy, and what are the challenges of informalization, and what measures have been taken by the government to handle the problem of informal economies. Okay, so this is something like also from this area of unemployment. Okay, so first let me put the structure of the topic. Labor force participation rate and workforce participation rate. Labor force participation rate, workforce participation rate. Then concept of employment elasticity. Concept of employment elasticity. Then types of unemployment. So in this types of unemployment, we have disguised unemployment, okay, and structural and all that. Okay. Obviously, this is the new chapter, online students. National income is over, unemployment is a separate topic. Separate topic. Okay. This is your second class? Okay. Today this is your second class or first class? I've just asked just like that because whenever new topic is started, no, you go for a coffee break, okay, and you nicely roam around and come back and all like that, no. So this is I've seen this culture here basically. So maybe it is something like you know unemployment very properly, or you feel anyhow the structure of the topic is not necessary. And after 45 minutes, you get so bored after writing one page that you need a break, you go back and come. You go completely, you can also go. That's go from there straight. Okay, so this is like a nice chill break. If it is really required, yes, break, yes, you can. But otherwise, you know, you chill out and go, come back when I am writing. Types of unemployment. Types of unemployment, there is disguised, cyclical and all. We'll see that. Okay. Okay. So instead of chilling out outside, now we started here. So better we will start in class only. Entertainment and all. Okay. So I forgot. Entertainment is like this, you know, the structure of the topic is gone. Okay. Methods of calculation of unemployment There is something like usual status, current weekly status, and current daily status. This is calculation, like how unemployment is measured. Okay, measurement basically. Measurement of unemployment. Okay, and then okay, difference between employment unemployment survey. This is called as EUS survey. EUS is employment unemployment survey versus periodic labor force survey. This is a new survey which came up in 2017-18. Periodic labor force survey. Okay, so employment unemployment survey, periodic labor force survey. So methods of calculation or measurement, it is usual status, weekly status, and current daily status. Okay. Then what are the reasons or reasons for unemployment in countries like India? Reasons. So what are the main reasons for unemployment? I think you should be knowing that, most of you. No, in general we know, no, like why in India unemployment is high. Okay, so then so new methods, that is new method is something like some changes. Okay, so critically analyzing PLFS survey. So what are the main problems of PLFS survey? Okay, so PLFS survey challenges basically. Periodic labor force survey, there are some challenges. And then measures taken. Measures taken. Here basically some data is important. Okay, data is something like here 1994 to 2004-5, this data. And then formal versus informal. Okay, casual labor versus regular worker. Then impact of globalization. Impact of globalization on informalization of Indian economy. Okay, and then we'll also see something like reasons for casualization, reasons for increase in casual labor, reasons for increase in casual labor. Okay, so that is why casual labor started increasing in countries like India. 1991 is one aspect. Okay. Post-reform measures taken by government. That is after 1991, what did the government do to handle the problem of unemployment? That is called post-reform. And last would be some current, this you have to update anyhow. Some current measures taken to handle unemployment. So this is the structure of the topic. Okay, so these are the areas. So mainly for mains, prelims, anyhow, the concepts are there, which is very simple. Is this clear? Okay, so when I use the word unemployment, first thing is unemployment is not only an economic problem, it is also a social problem because it can affect institutions like marriage and family. So unemployment is both an economic as well as social problem. That is very clear. And unemployment is generally seen as involuntary idleness. Generally, economists use the word involuntary idleness. So, involuntary idleness means voluntarily if you are idle. Okay, for example, students are idle to do a better job probably, or get into IAS or something. So, you are generally not seen as unemployed. You are generally not seen as part of the labor force because you are not interested in taking a job only currently. You are not interested in taking a job currently. So, generally unemployment economists talk about involuntary idleness. Involuntary means if you are voluntarily idle, generally it is not seen as unemployment. That is the meaning. Voluntarily idle, then it is not seen as unemployment. Okay, then you know this word called labor force from the basics class. Okay, so when I use the word labor force, let's say those who are between this age to 15 to 59 or 64 years, who are already working is something like the workforce, plus those who are looking for work but no work. Okay, so those who are between this age who are already working, that is workforce, plus those who are looking for work. Is this clear? This is labor force. Now, when I use the word unemployment rate, whenever I use the word unemployment rate, so unemployment rate is always measured as a percentage of labor force. Okay, so unemployment rate is nothing but labor force minus workforce divided by labor force into 100. Okay, so labor force minus workforce is nothing but those who are looking for work in this criteria but no work divided by the labor force into 100. That means, suppose because of India, there is one more problem. The problem in India is due to dissatisfaction of not getting a job, many of them stopped looking for work. Especially women. Okay, so they decided not to work due to several conditions. They decided to become housewives, maybe due to different conditions. It can be law and order situation, or situations at the workplace, or cultural aspect, or lack of appropriate transportation, whatever it is. So they decided to stay back at home. That means they are part of the working age population, that is between the age of 15 to 59 or 15 to 64, but they are also not demanding work. There are many. Okay, they are not demanding work. But that aspect of those who are not demanding work cannot be measured in the unemployment rate. Are you able to get this? Cannot be measured in the unemployment rate. For example, during COVID, many of them would have lost jobs and they would have lost hopes in life. And after 2019, they would have stopped demanding work. Are you able to get this? They will not look for new jobs also. This is something like they are like okay with not looking for a job because though they try, they may not get the job of their choice, or this is because of that reason they are not demanding work. So this challenge, this aspect of those who are not demanding work cannot be checked in this concept of unemployment rate. I hope it is clear. So that aspect cannot be checked in this unemployment rate, because unemployment rate only talks about those who are looking for work but no work divided by the labor force into 100. So it is not clearly going to tell you those who stop demanding work. So is it completely sufficient? Definitely not. Those who have stopped demanding work cannot be checked in this process. Okay, and that is the reason you have other things also like the labor force participation rate, etc. Or you also have to check the employment rate, not just the unemployment rate. Okay, so you are checking the unemployment rate, you also have to check the employment rate, those who are employed. Okay, fine. So till here, is it clear? Okay, now what are the main reasons? Now next thing is this clear? This is known already, this is known to you. Before we write, you just tell me what are the main reasons for unemployment problem in countries like India. In India, what do you think are the main reasons for unemployment? What? Yes, yes. Population pressure, right? So I will write it in a different way. I will write increase in labor force. So same, he said population pressure or increase in labor force, and this increased labor force is not absorbed by the secondary or the tertiary sector. Not absorbed by the secondary or the tertiary sector. Is that clear? Okay, so this increased labor force could not be absorbed. Then what else? Unskilled. Okay, so this is basically lack of skills or training, or we can say lack of vocational training. Vocational training is lack of job oriented training. Suppose Nehruvian philosophy was basically focused on IITs. It's a good thing, IITians are required, but at the same time probably ITIs, electrician, plumber, fitter, focus should also, it should have been there, so that more job oriented training will create more employment opportunities. I think you're getting this, right? So lack of skilled training, skill development or vocational training, etc. That is also a reason for unemployment in countries like India, obviously. Then what else? So another important challenge in countries like India is the problem of jobless growth. Okay, problem of jobless growth. So when I use the word jobless growth, it is something like, though there is economic growth, okay, economic growth is required for employment generation, but economic growth is not sufficient for employment generation in countries like India, because in India we have challenges of jobless growth. Is this clear? So though the economy was growing at 8 to 9% also, the challenge with India is listen to this concept, because in India, though there is growth, India's case, the employment elasticity started decreasing. Okay, so what is the meaning of employment elasticity? So one more concept here. Employment elasticity is something like change in employment to change in GDP. So change in GDP, for example, every 1% change in GDP, what is the change with respect to employment? Are you able to get this? That means if GDP is increasing by 1 percentage point, what is the percentage rate change with respect to employment generation? So India's case, the problem is, though GDP was increasing after 1990s, the employment generation actually did not happen. So there are clear statistics which show. So what is the meaning of employment elasticity? The impact of change in GDP on employment, or the changes induced by GDP change on employment aspect. Okay, so when the GDP is changing, is it really changing the employment or the number of jobs created? So in 1973, if I have to take the data also, from 1973 to 1983, employment elasticity was 0.52. But by the time of 2011-12, employment elasticity became 0.04. 0.04 means this is almost zero. When I say 0.04, it is almost zero. That means no new jobs were getting created. Almost zero means no new jobs are getting created. This shows actually with a change in GDP, for every 1% change in GDP, more jobs were getting created in 70s and 80s in comparison to 2011-12 or today. Are you able to get this? So this shows in proportion to the GDP increase, the number of jobs that were creating was obviously higher in 70s and 80s in comparison to after LPG. Is this clear? So after LPG, this shows that this is a clear indicator. Employment elasticity going down is a clear indicator of Indicator of what? Jobless growth. Is this clear? Okay. Now if you take the agriculture, employment elasticity in agriculture in 2011 to 11-12 was around minus 0.42. Minus means, that means something like employment elasticity in agriculture started becoming negative. Negative means forget about new jobs getting created. Existing jobs are gone because of mechanization entering into agriculture. There is no more mechanization into agriculture. So you cannot depend on core cropping for creation of jobs. You have to depend on allied sectors of agriculture if you want to create jobs, like dairying, fishing, horticulture, livestock, etc. But you cannot depend on purely cropping for creating more jobs. This is a clear indication that you have to depend on allied sectors on one side, and you also have to depend on something like the manufacturing sector for creation of jobs. Okay. Then unemployment problem is also because there is a challenge which you could see, that there is disguised unemployment, where this disguised unemployment is agriculture. Because of this disguised unemployment, that means they're disguised, their employment is disguised. It looks as if they are working in rural areas, but that means the employment is disguised there, it is not visible. Okay, so it is disguised, they're not working in fact, but they look as if they are working. This is called disguisedly employed. So most of them started moving from the rural areas to urban areas. So that means because of this challenge, there was something called as the rural-urban migration. Rural-urban migration leading to more unemployment in the urban areas. If there are adequate opportunities in the rural areas, or if there are allied activities which are doing well, agriculture allied activities in the rural areas, nobody will be interested in coming to urban areas and live in those slums. Understood? No. Slums have inhuman, subhuman living standards, and nobody will be interested in coming from the rural area if the agriculture is really doing well. So why will he become a watchman or something coming to the cities? This is a very big problem. No, this is called as rural urban migration, creating challenges of unemployment in the urban areas basically. So government could not, or failed in terms of creating something like jobs in the allied sectors in the rural areas so that people can stay back. After 1991, they wanted to come to manufacturing sector, or other than agriculture they wanted to enter. They came to the cities, but they did not have skills for manufacturing. They don't have skills for the services sector. So they ended up in informal sectors. Are you able to get this? They ended up in informal sectors. Is this clear? What about farmer's family working with farmer at the farm? Okay. Farmer's families, he'll come with the family. Okay, it's not he's leaving the family and coming. In Indian society, you will read about feminization of agriculture. Okay, feminization of, there was in UPSC previous question also, in society, of course not in economy, on feminization of agriculture. Feminization, more women in agriculture, more women. So why migration, men migration? Okay, fine. Now, disguised unemployment, rural urban migration, is this clear? What other reasons for unemployment in India? Lord Macaulay's useless English education. So this is basically how you can put it as education system. Lord Macaulay's education system. No, this education system is not so useful for jobs. Not so useful. But at the same time, it's not that. So 10 days back, I met one student outside. Now he was saying all this institutional education is hopeless and useless. This is the statement he made. Okay, then he said, and that too, we also studied engineering and management and all that. Now suddenly you say all this institutional education. Then I asked him, why do you feel that way? Then his answer was, you check, sir, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, and he started giving those examples. Now these are those people who are college dropouts or did not go to college, they made it big. Okay, accepted. Then the next question, do you have something in mind? No, then shut up and you don't have anything in mind. You don't have anything in mind. You don't have something. This institutional system is for those you don't have ambition. You don't know what to do. When you don't know what to do, go with the flow. That's all. No, you don't know what to do. You don't have anything in mind. It's not. So, and then he says, I'm going to come up with a startup. I've decided to quit UPSC. That's what I got irritated. So he said, I'm going to quit UPSC, startup and all that. So, do you have startup in mind? No, I'm thinking. Okay, you're thinking now. Now, that doesn't work. Okay, those who have set it up also, they are struggling. And now you are just thinking and you say all this education and all. No. That is accepted, and Macaulay's education system is useless, accepted. Okay, so if you have a better option, then yes. So education system, what is the challenge in the education system? You don't have university industry interface. University industry interface, that means whatever skills you learn, for example, what are the skills required for working for an IT company? English, not programming. First qualification is English. Second qualification is Google. Most of the jobs, most of them are put 7 years fake experience and manage, that. How is it possible without work experience? Just understand. Okay, so that is something like, this is how things are working. This is the reality. Education system is also a challenge, accepted. Lack of entrepreneurship talent. So job creators are less, entrepreneurs are less, and basically job creators are less. Now of course, most of the IITians have decided not to go abroad. They are coming up with startups, etc. That startup culture started last 3-4 years in India. It's a good sign. Why it's a good sign? Because you'll create what? Jobs. Government will not create jobs anymore. It is these entities who have to create jobs, and therefore lack of entrepreneur talent or entrepreneurship is also a reason for unemployment. I hope it is clear. Okay. Now comes the challenges which you are talking about. For example, muted manufacturing. Okay. This is one challenge. Muted manufacturing means if I have to observe last 15-20 years, the contribution of manufacturing to GDP is around 14 to 16% only. The contribution of manufacturing to GDP. So in the secondary sector, you have manufacturing, you have electricity, you have construction. But in this secondary sector, the growth was not really happening in manufacturing. That means manufacturing contribution to GDP. So this manufacturing contribution to GDP is less or stagnant. What I mean is stagnant. It is there only. It is not improving as expected. So therefore, very few jobs will get created in the manufacturing sector. There are very few jobs get created in the manufacturing sector. How do you shift the labor from the agriculture sector to the manufacturing sector? So this is a big challenge. So manufacturing is one area which has to develop if you have to really create employment. Employment, you cannot depend on services sector as of now. Services sector in India is not for everybody. Services sector in India, most of the services sectors which are developing in India are knowledge sectors. Knowledge sectors like IT and call centers, IT enabled services, etc. These are not for everybody, isn't it? It requires skills, some skills. So-called skills are required. And how do you pull people from primary to tertiary? So this muted manufacturing is a big challenge. Then there are also issues with respect to labor laws. Heard of this word? Yes, stringent labor laws was a big challenge. So if a manufacturing company has 100 permanent employees, permanent means full-time, okay, then this manufacturing company has to take permissions from the government if it wants to retrench labor, kick out labor. So because of these labor laws, most of the manufacturing companies decided to go ahead with contract jobs only. So they did not create adequate full-time jobs in the manufacturing. So because of labor laws. So this was also one more important challenge. So labor laws issue is also a challenge, and failure of MSMEs, micro, small and Medium enterprises. See, MSMEs are generally labor intensive. Labor intensive. So, from the beginning, if you observe, one more reason is India focused on a growth called capital intensive growth. Remember this word? India focused on a growth called capital intensive growth rather than labor intensive growth. So capital intensive rather than labor intensive growth. This is a challenge. I hope it is clear. So second 5-year plan focus on heavy industries. There are statistics showing that for every 1 rupee which you spend on steel basically, on textiles, if you would have spent the same money, you will create 300 more jobs. You will create 300 more jobs. So this is clearly showing that this capital intensive technology is good for countries like Canada where you have aging population. You don't have labor available. It is always better you use capital intensive technology. But in a country where labor is available, if you use the same capital intensive technology, then it will create a problem of what? Unemployment. Is that okay? And then in Indian conditions, which is dependent on agriculture, and our agriculture is mostly rain fed, depending on monsoon. Now, all that was creating seasonal unemployment problems as well. Seasonal. So, you can't expect employment all round 12 months in agriculture. So, this is basically called as seasonal unemployment. I hope it is clear. Yeah, industrialization 4, artificial intelligence. Okay. Is this clear? We'll write few definitions and then we'll continue. That is better. Is this clear? Have you understood? Yes. This is not so difficult. Not so difficult. Maybe some national income, was it okay? Have you understood? Okay. If you have understood national income, money is there. There's one concepts related to money, national income, fiscal policy is there, and then external sector. And there are some areas in banking like the Basel III calculations, etc. These are the only areas. So somebody was saying the other day, you said, sir, economics is very easy. Then as and when this class is going national income and all, it is becoming complex. Economics is not English. Okay, there will be 1 or 2 topics where 1 or 2 formulas will be there. Only 1 or 2 formulas. How many we have written? Tell me. Gross versus net, factor versus market, and third what you have written? Domestic versus national. Only 3. We have derived everything from those 3 only. There are only 3. That is what. So, and one more thing is, somebody was saying, sir, grip is not coming. Grip will only come when you play properly and regularly. What grip is like? First time when you listen to the class, it's over. No. You have to solve some questions, read once or twice, then you will get the hold of those. Check some old question papers. Okay, enough now. Unemployment. Write down, it is not only an economic problem. Unemployment. It is not only an economic problem, but also a social problem. As it can lead to breakdown of social institutions. Like marriage and family. And also cause social unrest. Unemployment, according to economists, measures involuntary idleness. That is the time in which the individual is available for and willing to but are not able to find work. Those who are not willing to work will not be part of the unemployment. Not willing to. That is the doubt. Not willing to. Okay. Continue the same. Employment is important for generating growth. Employment is important for generating growth and removing poverty and eventually ensuring prosperity. Then put the heading basic concepts of unemployment. Under that, first one, labor force. Write down people between the age of 15 to 64. People between the age of 15 to 64 who are either employed or actively looking for employment. Continue. The workforce is part of labor force. Continue. The fraction of the labor force that is seeking work but cannot find it determines the unemployment rate. Then write that formula. Unemployment rate is equal to labor force minus workforce divided by labor force into 100. Labor force minus workforce divided by labor force into 100. Below that, write number of persons unemployed is equal to labor force minus workforce. Okay, then put the heading employment elasticity. It is an indicator widely used. For analyzing the operation of the labor market. For analyzing the operation of the labor market. It measures the percentage change. It measures the percentage change. It measures the percentage change in employment induced by percentage change in employment induced by change in GDP. Induced by change in GDP. Continue. Hence, elasticity of employment. Hence, elasticity of employment seeks to capture the responsiveness of the labor market. The responsiveness of the labor market to changes in macroeconomic conditions. To changes in macroeconomic conditions. Okay. It can also be, write down, employment elasticity only. It can also be defined as, change in employment for every 1% change in GDP. For every 1% change in GDP. Okay, so again you will see in the options like change in employment to every 1% change in GDP, that is also right. Okay, so that is what you should remember. Is that clear? Okay, so 2 minutes I'll give you break. In 2 minutes I'll give you break. That's why. In 2 minutes I will give you a break. 2 minutes break, how can I give? First of all, I can see your face expressions, don't worry. Okay, now this is dictation required for this? Is it okay? Very good. Then take a break. Yes. Okay, so the next one is types of unemployment. Okay, so this is before 2017 they used to ask these questions in prelims. After that they are not asking such easy questions. Okay, so like what is disguised unemployment? There was this question asked. Okay, disguised unemployment. There was a question already in prelims asked. Okay, so what are the different types of unemployment? First is we have disguised unemployment. So this disguised unemployment basically can be related to Indian agriculture. Indian agriculture. That is, more people than required are working in the farm. More people than required are working in the farm. Okay, so work can be done by 5, but 10 are working in the farm. Okay, so because of that, the marginal productivity, additional productivity of the labor is less or is almost zero. Marginal productivity of labor is almost zero. Okay. Then another important type of unemployment which we know is seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment. So this can also be related to Indian agriculture. This we can relate to Indian agriculture, where employment is not possible all round the year. Maybe from June to October there is employment, but after that it becomes difficult, isn't it? So all round the year if you expect employment, it is difficult in the agriculture. So this is called as seasonal unemployment. Okay. Now here, then what is underemployment? Anybody? Today, the biggest challenge in Indian context, more than unemployment problem. Of course, unemployment is a big problem. Along with that, you have challenges of underemployment. So what is this underemployment? Not satisfied. Okay, not satisfied with the work. Why? His ability is more. Okay. Okay. So one aspect of underemployment is something like somebody who's working below his skill set. Somebody is working below his skill set. That means, for example, engineers working in call center. So, okay, so to be very specific, or MBAs working as receptionist or something. So this is something like you're working way below your qualification or way below your skills. Okay, so this is called as underemployment, one aspect of it. So there was one notification long back, 5 years back in UP for a group 4 messenger job in government. Okay, and 25 lakh applications came. It was a big news. More than 25 lakh applications came. And engineers applying is not a surprise because engineers are there from constable to IPS officers. But even many PhD grads have applied. So either they are not getting job outside, or is it that they are so fond of government that they want to get into government. This is the situation, no? Okay, so it clearly shows the situation of employment in India. This was just 4 to 5 years back. Okay, so underemployment can be seen from 3 perspectives basically. One perspective is somebody who's working way below his skills, okay, or somebody whose wages or salary is way below his qualification. His salary is way below his qualification. Okay, so his qualification is high, but the salary which he is getting is very less. Or it can be something like somebody who is working in part-time, or is working in gig or part-time, but he is expecting a full-time job. But he is looking for a full-time job. Somebody who's working part-time, but he is expecting for a full-time job. So all these can be seen as what? Underemployment. Working way below the skills, okay, paid below the qualification, or some part-timers looking for full-time, but they are not getting the full-time job, they are still in the part-time. So this is a very big challenge in India. And the main reason for underemployment in India, what is the main reason? What is the main reason for underemployment? Manufacturing. Low vacancy, poverty. What I feel is improper planning, skills, okay, planning. See, most important is even poverty is a challenge, you know, family pushes him into taking some job which comes. Okay, so poverty is also one of the main reasons for underemployment. They cannot afford his education or something, they'll say, whatever you get, you just join. And this chap goes and drives a Ola. Finish. Once he started driving Ola, initially he will feel, okay, this is fantastic, I'm roaming around, I'm getting money. Then later, after 3 months, he'll understand Ola is Ola only. Okay. So, this is what happens. So, initially, this boy buys a new car and starts driving. Okay, so this is all challenges. Basically, poverty is one. Okay, fine. Next is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical. So what is the meaning of cyclical unemployment is? Basically, this unemployment is mainly because of the cycles of the economy. So cycles of the economy means the economy is not doing well. There is a situation of recession. Recession, what is recession? Negative growth rate for more than 2 quarters, or during situations of depression. That is, there is a problem with respect to growth, And this unemployment can also be seen as demand-driven unemployment. Demand-driven. There is no demand in the economy. There is no demand in the economy. Okay, so because of lack of demand, okay, so slowly, subsequently, production also is going to reduce. No new jobs are going to get created, or existing jobs are going to be lost. And therefore, there is an unemployment problem in countries like India as well as abroad. During COVID pandemic, this is what happened. No pent-up demand. Okay, means automatically consumption is dropping. Consumption is not there, means demand is dropping. No demand, no production. So the activity doesn't run. So generally during such situations, government uses counter-cyclical policies, countering the cycles of the economy. I mentioned this earlier also. Countering the cycles of the economy. You want to counter this cycle, the growth is going down. You want to revive the cycles of the economy. So government can either go ahead with fiscal stimulus, remember, pumping money into the economy, or RBI can go ahead with monetary stimulus. So, of course, cyclical unemployment problem is there in India, but mainly developed countries, for developed countries, if they handle cyclical unemployment, it is sufficient for them. But in countries like India, along with cyclical, you also have to handle disguised and other things. Why? Because in Indian context, we also have a challenge of what? Jobless growth. No, jobless growth means growth is there. Growth is there means cycles of the economy are okay. And still you have unemployment. Cycles of the economy is okay, but still you have unemployment. That is a challenge in India. But cyclical unemployment is also called as demand-driven unemployment, and it is mainly because of the cycles of the economy. That is, the economy is not doing well, growth is coming down, recession situation or depression, there is a problem of unemployment. Then another important unemployment is the structural unemployment. Structural unemployment, and this structural unemployment is very common, and this is one such unemployment which can never be removed from any economy. This can never be removed. That means though the economy is running at its full potential, economy is doing well also at its full growth potential, still structural unemployment will remain. It's mainly a developed countries concept. So this remains. Why? Because what is the structural unemployment? Structural unemployment is unemployment because of mismatch, between the skill sets of the job. The job requires some skills. Mismatch between the skill sets of the job and the skills which the people have or the labor force has. Okay, so there is a mismatch or a gap between the skills required for the job and the skills required by the labor force. So as I mentioned earlier also, I don't know whether I've mentioned, in the next 5-6 years, even now also, working for IT companies is becoming very challenging in US also. And one of the main reason is ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence, updations and regularly. That means you have to update yourself so very regularly that you will feel this job is not, let me do for only 8 years or 10 years. Let's think about passive income. You know what is passive income, no? So without working, you have created something, let the money flow. This is what most of the people in US are feeling. India also there is that problem, but India it is very difficult. No, first of all, India, the salaries itself. Okay, so now the question here is, that means because of technological changes at a fast pace, okay, there is a lot of changes in the job environment. So job environments are becoming even more stressful because of AI, artificial intelligence, because before you learn one, there is a new thing to be learnt. Before you learn one entity, there's a new software, new development which you have to learn. So your whole life is, learning is a good process, but learning so that you survive is not good. Every day. This is what is happening in the job market currently, especially in the IT industry, in US as well. That means if your skills are not matching the job, you have to go learn new skills and come back, or he will kick you out. You go, automatically you will go learn and come back. Either ways, this is what? Structural unemployment. So whenever there is structural changes in the economy, for example, structural changes, India agriculture was contributing to the major chunk of our GDP. But after 1990s, services sector contributed to the major chunk of GDP. Now the question is, the skills required for the services sector, especially IT and IT enabled services, are completely different. So though everybody knows that services sector is contributing to the major chunk of GDP, they cannot shift to the services sector unless and until you have the requisite skills. So if you don't have the requisite skills, you will not get into the services sector. So you cannot, your manufacturing is still not developed, and therefore you have to stay back with primary sector. That is what is the challenge of a structural change. Structural change will create problems unless and until you adapt. So tomorrow artificial intelligence and robotics will take away India in one go. It is, everybody feels it's a gradual change which has already entered, but there will be a stage where there will be a drastic blow where it will take away in one go, and then suddenly you will find most of the jobs in India are not relevant. This is what is going to happen. Most of the jobs are replaced by artificial intelligence. This is called as a wave. If India adopts to this wave, it is okay. If India doesn't adopt to this wave, then unemployment problem. Okay, so this is called a structural unemployment. Another one is frictional unemployment. So frictional unemployment is also something which cannot be removed from any economy. Okay, so this frictional unemployment is also called as search unemployment. Search unemployment. So that is basically your hopping jobs. Okay, so in between jobs, suppose you're in TCS, you want to go to Infosys or Amazon or whatever it is. So in between jobs, you are idle. In between jobs, you are idle. You are searching for new opportunity. This is called as search unemployment or frictional unemployment. It can happen. Suppose you guys have got some campus placement. You decided, no, let me work for 1 year and become IAS officer. So therefore, next 1.5 years, you decided to be idle. You are searching for a better opportunity in government. So this is also nothing but a kind of a frictional unemployment. So frictional unemployment can be voluntary. You are looking for better opportunities, or he kicked you out. Then also there is a chance of anything can happen, right? So, but two types of unemployment which cannot be removed from any economy. Two types of unemployment, though the economy is at its peak potential. You have handled cyclical unemployment, the economy is growing at its peak, and still two types of unemployment cannot be removed completely. They are structural and frictional. Okay, so I think it is clear, structural and frictional. Okay, then we have something called as open unemployment. Open unemployment means, this word of open unemployment is used when you are referring to long-term unemployment. Open unemployment word is used when we are referring to long-term unemployment problem. That means in 365 days, something like more than 180 days, there is no job. Okay, generally they use the word called chronic unemployment. Chronic, chronic disease that persists for a long period. Similarly, chronic unemployment means he is unemployed for a very long period, and we also call it as chronic unemployment or open unemployment. Long-term unemployment for a period of at least more than 6 months. More than 6 months. 180 days is unemployed, you call it as open or chronic. So, I think it is clear. Structural, technology, change in technology. Okay. Frictional is also called as search unemployment. You're searching for new jobs. Okay. And then cyclical unemployment, this is demand driven. During COVID, there was cyclical unemployment because market did not do well. So, it is basically demand or market related unemployment is cyclical unemployment. Is this clear? So, put the heading types of unemployment. Yes. So the company decides. See, you can't say specifically that is cyclical, but obviously it is cyclical. The company does not have the capacity to run it, so they will. Okay, put the heading types of unemployment. Types of unemployment. First one, cyclical or demand deficient unemployment. Cyclical or demand deficient unemployment. Demand deficient unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is due to falling demand. Cyclical unemployment is due to falling demand. Or business cycle downturn. business cycle downturn. Okay. Next one, seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment. Write down rain-fed Indian agriculture. Rain-fed Indian agriculture cannot create employment. Cannot create employment for 12 months. For 12 months, that is, they work during a particular season. They work during a particular season. Okay. Then put the heading frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment. This unemployment involves people. This unemployment involves people searching for new employment. Searching for new employment. And therefore it is also called search unemployment. It is generally voluntary in nature. It is generally voluntary in nature. Generally voluntary in nature. Or workers being fired by employers. Or workers being fired by employers. But generally it is what? Voluntary. Generally they are looking. Is this clear? Next one, structural unemployment. Structural unemployment. This unemployment is caused by the mismatch between worker skills and skills required for the job. Employers seek workers with appropriate skill sets. Okay. Next, appropriate skill sets. Then write underemployment. Underemployment. It is defined as underutilization of skills that is employment of worker of high skill in low wage work okay, low wage work that does not require such ability. Okay. Next, put open unemployment. According to NSSO, National Sample Survey Organization, NSSO. If a person does not find work, if a person does not find work for a long-term period, generally 183 days, is termed as open unemployment, or chronic unemployment. Okay, then put the heading natural unemployment. It exists when the economy is at full employment, that is those who want work get work at prevailing market wages. Continue. Frictional and structural unemployment are considered natural byproducts of a healthy expanding economy. While they can be reduced through proper training and education, total elimination is probably undesirable. And likely impossible. So removing that is difficult. Though you are talking about other things being handled, these two will still remain. Which one? Frictional and structural. So next is measurement of unemployment. Okay. This topic is easy, right? Is it difficult? No. Okay. Somewhat okay. So now see here, there are different methods of measuring unemployment. So one is they use something called as usual status. Okay, usual status. So the meaning of usual status, again in this there are two things. One is called as the usual principal status. Okay, usual principal status. And another one is usual subsidiary status. So mainly this is the most significant one, usual principal status. So what is this usual status? What they do here? Nothing but, suppose today they have decided to calculate unemployment. They will take the data, or they will take the data of 1 year prior to the date of survey. So 1 year prior to the date of survey. That means you are going to, today you want to conduct the survey, you decided to take the data of 1 year prior to the date of survey. That means how many days? Basically you are taking the data of 365 days. 1 year prior to the date of survey, and you will use this data to find out the unemployment. And if somebody is unemployed for a period of 183 days, 183, that is around 6 months, then you are going to decide that it is something like long-term unemployment. Long-term unemployment. Okay, so you're taking a reference period of 1 year prior to the date of survey, and in this 1 year period, you're going to get the data of it. Okay, and this 1 year data, 365 days, if somebody has got job for at least 6 months, then he's employed. If he has not got any job for a period of around 6 months or 183 days, you are giving him unemployed status. This is what happens. Okay, so this is called as usual principal status. What is this? This is nothing but the usual principal status. But the problem with this approach is it helps in measuring long-term unemployment or chronic unemployment, but it cannot measure intermittent unemployment. What is the meaning of intermittent? So somebody is getting job for 1 month, then he is idle for another 15 days, 20 days, and then he will work for another 10 days, he is idle for another 10 days, 15 days. So he is working intermittently, isn't it? That is called as intermittent unemployment. So intermittent aspect cannot be checked using the usual status. You are only able to check chronic unemployment. Within 1 year span, is he at least employed for a period of long-term period of around 6 months. This is what you can check. You can't check intermittent unemployment problem using the usual status. I think it is clear. Okay. Now the subsidiary status they started using in the new periodic labor force survey. So in the subsidiary status, what they will do, it's an extension of principal status. Extension means he has already qualified in that criteria as employed under the usual principal status. That means he's got employment of at least 183 days. Plus, if he is employed for additional 30 days, that means in the new survey, periodic labor force survey, they are checking. So its subsidiary status is an extension. You will also give him usual subsidiary status if he is employed for another 30 days in a year, another 30 days in a year. If he is employed for another 30 days in a year, so here you are only taking 30 days criteria. So 30-day criteria for the usual subsidiary status, 30-day criteria for the usual subsidiary status. So that means when they are conducting the periodic labor force survey, what they will do is, first thing they will check whether in that 365 days he is employed for at least 180 days or 183 days is checked. If he is employed for 6 months or 180 days, you are giving him usual principal status. Then you are checking if he is employed for another 30 days, okay, other than the earlier criteria. He is already qualified the earlier criteria. Now, then another 30 days also you are checking. If it is there, if he is employed, then you are going to give him even the usual subsidiary status. This is what they were doing in the periodic labor force survey. I will come to the survey later. Is this clear till here? Okay. Now, then there is another one which is called as the current weekly status. Current weekly status. So the word itself says you are going to take a reference period of 7 days. Reference period here is 7 days. That means I am taking the data of 7 days prior to the date of survey. Today I want to do the survey. I am taking the data of 7 days prior to the date of survey. Now in this 7 days period, you will check if somebody is employed for a period of at least 1 hour or more, 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. On 1 or more days. Okay. So here the reference period is 7 days. In this 7 days, you are going to check if somebody is employed for at least 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. So 1 hour or more on 1 or more days means what? If he is employed for 1 hour on 1 day also in that 7 days. If he is employed for 1 hour on 1 day also in that 7 days, he will get employed status. Okay, so what are you doing here? You are taking a reference period of 7 days. In that 7 days, you are checking whether he is employed for 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. 1 or more days means basically you are checking if he is employed for 1 hour on 1 day also. You are going to treat him as employed. So this CWS will basically help us in identifying intermittent unemployment. If you use US plus CWS together, so what will happen? US will tell you whether he is chronically unemployed or not. Chronically unemployed. Then you will check In a 1 week period, is he really employed for at least 1 hour? At least he's not idle in the 1 week period. In 1 week period, at least did he get 1 hour of employment or not? This is what is going to be checked in the CWS. Is this clear? This measures something like the intermittent unemployment problem. Is that okay? Then we have something called as the CDS. CDS is current daily status. CDS is current daily status. Now this is more comprehensive. It is also called as a time rate. It is also called as a time rate. It is more comprehensive. Okay, so what is this time rate? Here also the reference period is 7 days. 7 days. But unlike the earlier, you are going to consider each day. In the 7 day period, you are going to consider each day. On each day, you will check if he is employed for at least minimum 1 hour. If he is employed for at least minimum 1 hour, but less than 4 hours, is every day you are checking. On day 1 you are checking if he is employed for 1 hour, but is employed for 1 hour minimum but less than 4 hours. It indicates that he is employed for only half a day. You are taking partial employment here. You will treat it as he is employed for half a day. But if he is employed for 4 hours or more, or 4 hours or above, if he is employed for 4 hours or above, you will treat him as he is employed for the full day. You will treat it as he is employed for the full day employment. Is this clear? Generally they are taking the criteria as 8 hours of employment. No, so kind of that. So 8 hours. So what they are doing is each day they are checking. So this first day, is he employed for half a day or full day? You are going to check. So based on the time, basically, if he is employed for minimum 1 hour but less than 4 hours, you will treat it as he is employed for half a day. But he is employed for 4 hours and above, then you will treat him as employed for the full day. So like this, you are going to calculate for the whole week. CDS, current daily status. So current daily status will not only talk about full employment, that is, it will not only talk about regular employment, it also talks about partial employment. Partial employment is being employed for half day here. Okay, so you will say whether he is employed for, maybe he is employed for only 4 days. Okay, in a 7 day period, based on maybe 3.5 days is employed. So like that, CDS will tell you. So one is usual status for chronic 183 day long term, that is the usual principal status. Second is CWS, where you try to measure intermittent unemployment, 1 week reference, employed for 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. Then CDS, each day is a reference in the 1 week period, and it also measures something like partial. Put the heading measurement of unemployment. Measurement of unemployment. First one, usual status. With a reference period of 365 days, preceding the date of survey, a person is considered employed if he is engaged in an economic activity, for a long term period. This methodology indicates chronic or long-term unemployment in the country. Is that okay? Next one. Usual subsidiary status. usual subsidiary status. It is an extension of usual principal status. It is an extension of usual principal status. Extension of usual principal status, and it considers 30 days as the criteria. 30 days as the criteria. To give subsidiary status. 30 days as criteria to give subsidiary status. 30 days as the criteria to give subsidiary status. It's an extension of the first one. Extension of the first one that is there, and then 30 days as a criteria for subsidiary status. Is that clear? Okay, then put the heading current weekly status. Current weekly status. It determines the activity status of a person. It determines the activity status of a person with reference to a period of preceding 7 days. Preceding 7 days. Preceding 7 days. Continue. A person having worked for 1 hour or more. A person having worked for 1 hour or more. 1 hour or more. On 1 or more days. On 1 or more days during the reference period. During the reference period gets the employed status. Gets the employed status. Okay, then put the heading current daily status. Current daily status. Write down. It considers the activity status of a person. It considers the activity status of a person for each day prior to the date of survey. For each day prior to the date of survey. In bracket mention 7 days reference period and close the bracket. 7 days reference period and close the bracket. Write down. A person who works for 1 hour but less than 4 hours is considered to have worked for half a day. Is considered to have worked for half a day. And if he works for 4 hours or more, during the day, if he works for 4 hours or more during the day, he is considered employed. He is considered employed for the whole day. He is considered employed for the whole day. The daily status flow rate. The daily status flow rate is evidently more inclusive. Is evidently more inclusive. Covering open as well as partial unemployment. Covering open as well as partial unemployment. Is that okay? Write these three questions first. This is the mains questions. Till here I think it is clear, no? Simple only. There is no confusion, no? So write down first question. Write the first question. The nature of growth in India. The nature of growth in India in the recent past is often described as jobless growth. Is often described as jobless growth. Do you agree with this view? Question mark. Do you agree with this view? Question mark. Give arguments in favor of your answer. Give arguments in favor of your answer. Okay. So it's a 10 marker, 150 word. Next question. This is previous UPSC question, write down. Comment on the challenges for inclusive growth. Comment on the challenges for inclusive growth. Comment on the challenges for inclusive growth, which includes careless and useless manpower. Which includes careless and useless manpower. In the Indian context, careless and useless manpower in the Indian context. Suggest measures to be taken. Suggest measures to be taken for facing these challenges. Is that okay? Yes. Next question. Define informal employment. Define informal employment. What type of vulnerabilities? What type of vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are faced by workers of informal sector in India. Workers of informal sector in India, question mark. Point out required policy measures. Point out required policy measures. Required policy measures to reduce social and economic hardships. To reduce social and economic hardships of Indian informal sector workers. Of Indian informal sector workers. Is that clear? Okay, so now the next aspect is, before I discuss, now one more area is this aspect of EUS survey versus the periodic labor force survey. So this is a new survey methodology which they started using 2017-18. Okay. Now, when we use the word formal and informal generally, so, or when I say, for example, when we talk about employment, one is we have something called as a self-employed. Self-employed. And another one is basically a hired worker. Somebody who is hired. Hired worker. He is hired by some company, somebody. Now in this hired worker, again you have casual labor or casual workers, and you also have the regular workers, casual workers as well as the regular workers. Okay. Now, unorganized sector can be there here also. Somebody is self-employed. Okay, so you have all these small shops in the Karol Bagh and Rajendra Nagar. It's clearly visible. Okay, though they are self-employed, they are operating in the informal sector. Okay, it's not a formal area. Now, when we talk about hired workers also, hired workers, let's say it's a decent enough companies also. You have in the companies also, you can have casual labor as well as regular workers. So, what is the basic difference when I say casualization? So, increase in casualization means there is more of casual labor in comparison to the regular workers. Regular workers are those who are on the payroll of the company. Regular workers, they are on the payroll of the company. They are on the payroll of the company. Payroll of the company means they have all the rules related to labor are applicable for them. Payroll of the company, that means if you want to pull them out also, you have to give a notice period, procedure has to be followed, all that will be there if you are on the payroll of the company. Now, casual labor is not on the payroll of the company. Now, they generally work for the daily wages. They are generally going to work for daily wages. They are not on the permanent payroll of the company. Okay. And along with that, daily wages, and they are not on the permanent payroll. Now, all the social security benefits will not be there for them. There will be few social security benefits, but here they will have all the social security benefits. They will have all social security benefits. All social security benefits are there for the regular worker. All social security benefits will not be there for them. For example, if I have to talk about something like the pension or all the social security benefits may not be there. But maybe working hours. Okay, so they are also eligible for regular working hours. That is the aspect of working hours, how many hours they work. Okay, so such kind of rules are applicable. If they are doing overtime, payments are given. Working hours plus overtime kind of thing, payments may be given to them. Overtime payments can be given to them also. But they will not have all the social security benefits which are given to the regular workers. I think it is clear. Okay. So this is increase in casualization. Increase in casualization means more of casual jobs. So if there can be a mains question asking like, what are the reasons for increase in casualization of workforce? Main reasons for increase in casualization. UPSC asked, what is the impact of globalization on informalization? This was a question asked by UPSC. So if suppose, what are the main reasons for increase in casualization or casualization of workforce or more of informalization? So basically, when we say formal, informal also, going by the bookish definition, when I use the word formal employment, or when I say informal employment, all those, if you see employment in government and government departments, whether it is the police department or the post office or whatever it is, everything falls under the formal category. Okay. Plus, it also includes all the private employment. Where in that company there are at least employees about 10 and above. That means if in a private enterprise also, if there are 10 and more workers, there's a small company which is running a private entity. In that private company, if the number of employees are at least 10 and above, then you generally treat it as formal employment. Anyhow, government related departments, government related companies, PSUs, public sectors, all this formal. All that is formal only. And also the private entity or the private sector, in the private sector also, if the companies have or the institutions have at least 10 or more workers, generally you treat it as formal. If I say informal employment basically, now in the private, one is unorganized sectors, those who are working. Okay, so that is all informal generally. Okay, and along with that, in the private sector where there are less than 10 employees, okay, working for a very small, maybe there is this burger shop or a very small shop which is there outside. Okay, and there are only 3 employees who are working. Okay, less than 10 employees, it will be treated as what? Informal. Okay, so informalization, slight difference is there. So sometimes even in companies like TCS and Infosys, there are also contract jobs. So contract jobs, basically they need not be on the permanent payroll of the company. They will manage. Why unnecessarily? That means MNCs also think if they want to save costs. So MNCs, if they want to save costs, they'll decide on why to go ahead with putting somebody in the permanent payroll. Okay, so or if they are low skilled employees in a big corporation, low skilled employees in a big corporation. So why to put them on the permanent payroll? Let them operate as a casual workforce, casual workforce. So MNC is becoming greedy, etc. That is also a reason for casualization of workforce. I hope you're able to follow. So we generally get confused. Now, what is this informal employment? Now, informal employment in the private sector is in those areas or those entities where there are less than 10 employees. It will be treated as informal. I think you're able to follow. Is this okay? Yes, now the question comes up. There was a question which was asked earlier, that is about how globalization had led to informalization. So now globalization has led to informalization. What do you think are the reasons for that? See, first of all, globalization, because of globalization, was there a migration from rural to urban areas? Yes. There was a migration. Globalization, there is a migration from rural to urban areas. People started moving from rural to urban areas after the impact of globalization. And because of that movement, okay, one is these people who started moving from the rural areas did not have the requisite skills for getting employed in either manufacturing or services. So most of them had to enter into the informal sectors, okay, or maybe as a casual workforce, So this also has led to informalization. This is the reason. Globalization has led to informalization. This is also reason for informalization. Is that clear? Okay, so another important aspect is globalization has led to structural change in the economy. So structural change in the economy, that is earlier 70% of GDP was coming from agriculture or the primary sector. Now after LPG reforms, around today 54%, now 54% of the output is coming from services sector. And services sector is, let's say, contributing to around 32% of employment. 32% of employment. Even today, if we see, around 42, we see that 42.4% of employment, 42% of employment is coming from the agriculture sector. That means more people are dependent. It's like, is it a true employment? Nobody knows. But 42.4% of the population are still dependent on agriculture. This is the occupational structure. But after 1991, but before 1990s, agriculture was contributing to major chunk of GDP. If you take the data of 60s and 70s. But after LPG, after 2000, it is clearly visible that contribution of agriculture to GDP started declining. And today we find last 5 years average, if I say, agriculture's contribution to GDP is only around 18%. Agriculture's contribution around 18. During COVID, it was 20. 18% of GDP it was contributing. That means agriculture's contribution has reduced. Okay, so this is a structural change. And which sector is contributing mainly? Services sector. But if people have to join services sector, two things should happen. Services sector should also create adequate employment, number one. But services sector, the number of jobs that got created did not happen as expected. So, and at the same time, the skills required for the services sector was not there. So, because of the structural change, people still remained with the agriculture, and jobs in agriculture are obviously informal jobs. You can't expect formal jobs. Okay, so most of the jobs in agriculture are informal in nature. Okay, so this is also another reason for, this is the impact of globalization. Globalization is responsible for structural change. Okay, and globalization has also increased subcontracting and outsourcing. Globalization has increased subcontracting or outsourcing. So around a bigger company, that means you get a project, you give these projects to smaller companies. Now these small companies will produce and give it. That is what is called as subcontracting. You outsource the projects so that you will be able to save costs. Outsourcing the project to save costs. So all this subcontracting and outsourcing was also you can say it is also responsible for informal aspect, or the jobs in these companies are general casual jobs. Okay, so or casual jobs, or these are basically operating in the informal aspect. Now another important challenge for informalization is after 1991 also, that is after globalization also, so manufacturing sector was muted. This is also called as I have written earlier also, muted manufacturing. Okay, muted manufacturing. Now one challenge is muted manufacturing, and another challenge is there was excess competition that was coming from the other MNCs, multinational companies, and because of which the smaller MSMEs could not compete. Smaller, micro, small and medium enterprises. Why they could not compete is because of the policies taken during 1991. What are the policies taken? For example, one policy is like deregulation of industries. Okay. Then they came up with dereservation of those goods which were earlier reserved for small scale industries. So earlier small scale industries are there. There were certain items which will be produced only by the small scale industries. For example, let's say matchbox. Matchbox, let's say it is reserved for the small scale sectors. So the bigger player will not enter into the matchbox sector. So it is only, these are some goods which are reserved for the small scale industries. But 1991 LPG, 1991 industrial policy said we are going to de-reserve. De-reserve means earlier goods which were reserved for the small scale sectors, we are opening it up to everybody for efficiency. So even a bigger player now can manufacture matchboxes. Bigger player can also manufacture matchboxes, means there will be competition from the bigger players. You're able to follow? Competition from the bigger players on the small scale industries, and these small scale sectors could not compete with the competition from the bigger players, and therefore they had to close down their shops. And because they had to close down their shops, automatically most of them become self-employed and mostly in the informal sector. LPG is responsible for that. Is that you're able to follow? This is a point from your Indian economic development. Okay, so Indian economic development, NCERT. Okay. It was a question straight away picked up from, straight away. Pick and push. That is what it did. Two questions directly picked from Indian Express explained column also. In the prelims also there are questions I can show. Of course not economics question. It's not economics, but direct pick explained column, that some bacteria they gave. Bacteria, and there's one other question also. Straight away pulled and they. So that means you're, of course it is there in PT. PT3. No problem, don't worry. PT 365 is there, but most of them have marked it wrong. How many you will remember? It's difficult, no. Newspaper, if you read, means you'll read 10 times, no. Same thing again and again, every day you will read. Okay, so then PT will be revision. So, but straight away you decided, no, I will not touch newspaper. Chalo, last mein dekh lenge. So you started reading only PT for 2 days or 2 weeks, and you thought everything you will remember. Okay, so that's also not possible. Come back now. It's not over. Hurry. What over? Huh? Wait. It's not just about teaching. You have to convince. make you sit. Okay, so, and that too for economics, where stories are very limited. Okay, so is this clear? Okay, so you write this question so that we will understand whether it is clear or not. That question, which question? The third one, which I think that is, I didn't give that question, no. So the question is, I'll just repeat don't write it. The question is how globalization, previous UPSC question, how globalization has led to reduction of employment in the formal sector. How globalization has led to reduction of employment in the formal sector of Indian economy. Is increased informalization detrimental to the development of the country? Two parts of the question. So don't write the question, you're already tired, I can understand. Two parts, globalization, reduction in formal employment, and challenges of informalization. Okay. Thank you.